Hello, my name is Betty, and I want to tell you about my dream. Ever since I was a little girl, I've always been fascinated by the English language. I would hear people speaking English in movies, on the radio, and even on the streets, and it sounded so beautiful and exciting to me. I imagined what it would be like to speak English fluently, to understand everything, and to communicate with people from all around the world. This dream stayed with me as I grew older. I dream of traveling to different countries, places where English is spoken. I imagine walking down the streets of London, visiting the museums, talking to the locals, and understanding everything they say. I want to explore New York City, see the tall buildings, and ask for directions without feeling nervous or confused. In my dream, I see myself ordering food in a restaurant, chatting with people at the bus stop, and feeling confident in every conversation. But it's not just about traveling for me. I also dream of making new friends who speak English. I think about how amazing it would be to have friends from different parts of the world. Friends who can teach me about their cultures, their traditions, and their lives. I want to be able to talk to them, laugh with them, and share stories with them in English. I believe that learning English will open the door to so many new friendships and connections. Another big part of my dream is getting a good job. I know that speaking English well can help me achieve this. I see myself working in a company where English is important. Maybe I'm in a meeting with people from different countries, and we're all speaking English to understand each other. Or perhaps I'm writing emails, giving presentations, or helping customers, all in English. I know that being able to speak English can help me grow in my career, earn more money, and have a better life. Every time I think about my dream, I feel excited and motivated. I know that learning English will take time, and it won't always be easy, but I also know that it's worth it. The idea of being able to travel, make friends, and succeed in my career makes me want to work hard and never give up. I believe that one day I will speak English well, and my dream will come true. And when that day comes, I will look back and be proud of the journey I took to get there. When I first decided to learn English, I knew I had to start with the basics. Like building a house, I needed to lay a strong foundation before anything else. For me, that foundation was the English alphabet. I remember sitting down with a notebook and a pencil, feeling both excited and a little nervous. I opened a page and began with the first letter, A. A, I said out loud as I carefully wrote it down. It felt strange at first, but I kept going. B, C, D, one by one, I wrote each letter. I took my time with each one, making sure I got the shape right. Sometimes, I would say the letter's name over and over in my head as I wrote it. A, B, C, trying to memorize how each letter looked and sounded. At first, it was challenging to remember all the letters. Some looked similar, and I would mix them up, but I didn't let that discourage me. Every day, I practiced writing the alphabet from A to Z. I would fill pages in my notebook, writing the letters over and over again. I used different colors to make it fun and to help me remember better. I even made little songs to remember the order of the letters. Slowly, the alphabet became my friend. I no longer had to think hard about it. When I saw a letter, I knew exactly what it was. Once I felt confident with the alphabet, I knew it was time to take the next step, learning simple words. I started with words that I would use every day, like hello, thank you, and goodbye. These were words that I had heard many times before, but now I wanted to understand them and say them correctly. Hello, I said to myself, repeating the word until it felt natural. I practiced saying it in the morning when I woke up. I said it to myself in the mirror. Hello, Betty. I imagined greeting people on the street, starting conversations with a simple hello. Next, I practiced thank you. This was an important word because I knew I would use it often. I practiced saying thank you for everything. When someone held the door for me, I would say thank you in my mind, even if I didn't say it out loud. I wanted to make sure that when the time came, I would say it confidently and clearly. Finally, there was goodbye. I imagined all the situations where I would need to say goodbye to someone. I practiced it just like I did with hello and thank you. I would pretend to end a phone call and say, goodbye, see you later. I wanted to be ready for any situation. Every day I practiced these words. I would say them while walking down the street, while eating breakfast, and even before going to bed. I would look for chances to use them even if it was just in my imagination. The more I practiced, the more comfortable I felt. The words started to become a part of me, and I knew that with each small step, I was getting closer to my goal of learning English. The beginning of my journey was not easy, but it was exciting. Learning the alphabet and those first few words made me realize that I could do this. I knew that there were many more words to learn, but I felt confident and ready to keep going. I knew that every word I learned was a step closer to achieving my dream, and that motivated me to keep practicing every day. After getting comfortable with the alphabet and some basic phrases, I knew it was time to expand my vocabulary. I decided to challenge myself by learning 5 new words every day. It wasn't too much to overwhelm me, but it was enough to keep me moving forward. I wanted to build my word bank, word by word, so that I could start expressing myself more freely in English. I bought a pack of small index cards to help me with this task. Each day, I would choose 5 words to learn. I would write the English word on one side of the card and its meaning in my native language on the other. For me, the act of writing the word down was important. It helped me remember the word and its meaning. Once I had my 5 words written down, I would carry those cards with me everywhere I went, whether I was at home, at work, or on the bus. I made sure they were always within reach. One day, one of the words I decided to learn was apple. It seemed like a simple word, but I was excited about it because it was something I could easily relate to. I picked up the card with apple written on it and looked at it closely. I said the word out loud several times, apple, 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 trying to let the sound and rhythm of the word sink into my memory. That afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and saw a bright red apple sitting on the counter. I pointed to it and said, "This is an apple." Saying the word in the presence of the actual object made it feel real and solid. I picked up the apple, held it in my hand, and repeated, "This is an apple." I even described it in my mind, thinking about how it felt, smooth, round, and slightly heavy. I took a bite and thought, I'm eating an apple. This simple exercise made the word stick with me. I wasn't just memorizing a word, I was connecting it to a real experience. I realized that this method worked well for me, so I applied it to the other words I was learning. For example, one day I learned the word book. I found a book on my shelf, picked it up, and said, "This is a book." I flipped through the pages and thought, I'm reading a book. Associating the word with an action made it easier for me to remember. Another time, I learned the word table. I would walk around my home and point to the dining table saying, "This is a table." I even set the table for dinner that evening, reminding myself of the word as I did so. Every day as I practiced, I made sure to review the words I had learned the previous days as well. I didn't want to forget them, so I would go back to my stack of cards and quiz myself. Sometimes, I would challenge myself by covering the English side of the card and trying to recall the word from its meaning in my native language. Other times, I would cover the meaning and try to remember what the word meant. This daily review reinforced what I had learned and helped to keep those words fresh in my mind. Learning 5 new words every day wasn't just about expanding my vocabulary. It was about building my confidence. With each word I learned, I felt a little more capable, a little more prepared to have a conversation in English. I could see my progress, and that motivated me to keep going. I knew that every word I added to my vocabulary was another tool in my English toolbox, something that would help me communicate more effectively. There were days when it was harder to remember the words, especially if they didn't have an obvious connection to something in my daily life, but I didn't let that stop me. I would try to create a mental image or a story around the word to help it stick. For instance, when I learned the word mountain, I imagined myself climbing a tall mountain and reaching the top. I would say to myself, I'm climbing a mountain. This visualization made the word more meaningful and easier to recall. Through this process, I learned that learning new words is not just about memorizing them, it's about making them part of your life, your thoughts, and your experiences. By doing this, I was slowly but surely turning English into something familiar and comfortable rather than something foreign and intimidating. Each day, as I added 5 more words to my collection, I felt a sense of accomplishment. I knew that with patience and persistence, these small steps would eventually lead to big results. And so I continued to learn one word at a time, knowing that each new word brought me closer to achieving my dream of speaking English fluently. As I continued to build my vocabulary, I realized that knowing words was only part of the puzzle. To really communicate in English, I needed to learn how to put those words together into sentences. That's when I began my journey into understanding grammar. At first, the idea of grammar seemed complicated and even a little intimidating, but I knew it was essential if I wanted to speak English well. I started with the basics. I learned that a sentence is like a small package of meaning, a way to express a complete thought. Every sentence needs at least 2 things, a noun and a verb. A noun is a word that names a person, place, thing, or idea, like dog, cat, house, or happiness. A verb is a word that shows action or a state of being like run, jump, is, or are. When you put a noun and a verb together, you can make a simple sentence. I remember the first sentence I created. The dog runs. It was a simple sentence, just 3 words. But to me, it felt like a big achievement. I was amazed that I could take 2 words I had learned separately, dog and run, and combine them to say something meaningful. It was like discovering a new way to express myself, and it opened up a whole new world of possibilities. I began practicing every day. I would take the words I was learning and try to put them into sentences. Sometimes I started with the noun, asking myself, what does the dog do? And then adding a verb, the dog runs. Other times, I would start with a verb and think about who or what was doing the action. Who runs? The dog runs. This simple exercise helped me understand how sentences worked. As I practiced, I realized that I could make many different sentences just by changing the nouns and verbs. For example, the cat sleeps, the bird sings, or the sun shines. I felt like I was unlocking a secret code, learning how to put words together in a way that made sense. It was exciting to see how flexible English could be, how I could use the same basic structure to say so many different things. I also started experimenting with adding more details to my sentences. I learned about adjectives, which are words that describe nouns. For example, instead of just saying the dog runs, I could say the big dog runs. Adding an adjective made the sentence more and specific. I could picture the dog in my mind, not just any dog, but a big dog. This made my sentences feel more alive, more colorful. Then I discovered adverbs, words that describe verbs. I learned that I could say, "The big dog runs quickly." The adverb quickly told me how the dog was running, adding even more detail to the sentence. I practiced making sentences like this, adding adjectives and adverbs to make my sentences richer and more expressive. I also started to notice patterns in the sentences I was creating. I saw that in English. The word order is usually very important. For example, in the sentence, "The dog runs," the noun comes before the verb. If I changed the order to "runs the dog," it didn't sound right. This taught me that grammar isn't just about knowing the parts of speech. It's also about understanding how to arrange them correctly to communicate clearly. To help me practice, I created a game for myself. I would take a noun and a verb and try to make as many sentences as possible. For example, with the noun cat and the verb eat, I came up with sentences like, "The cat eats," "The black cat eats," "The black cat eats slowly," and so on. The more I practiced, the more confident I became in my ability to create sentences on the spot. I also started paying attention to sentences I heard or read in English. I would listen to conversations, watch TV shows, or read simple English books, and I would try to break down the sentences. I asked myself, what is the noun? What is the verb? Are there any adjectives or adverbs? This helped me see how other people used grammar, and it gave me ideas for my own sentences. One of the most important things I learned was that making mistakes was part of the process. Sometimes I would create a sentence that didn't sound right, or I would mix up the word order. But instead of getting frustrated, I saw these moments as opportunities to learn. I would ask myself, what went wrong? How can I fix it? And then I would try again. Over time, I made fewer mistakes, and my sentences became clearer and more natural. Practicing grammar every day helped me gain a deeper understanding of how English works. It was like learning the rules of a new game, and the more I practiced, the better I got at playing it. I realized that grammar wasn't something to be afraid of. It was a tool that I could use to express my thoughts and ideas in a way that others could understand. It gave me the power to communicate more effectively, and that made me feel more confident in my English skills. As I continued to practice, I found myself creating sentences more easily and naturally. I could take any word I had learned and fit it into a sentence without much effort. I was no longer just memorizing words. I was using them to communicate, to tell stories, and to share my thoughts. This was a big step forward in my journey to learning English, and it made me feel like I was really starting to make progress. Understanding grammar has been one of the most important parts of my English learning journey. It has allowed me to move from just knowing words to actually using them in meaningful ways. And every time I create a new sentence, I feel like I'm one step closer to my dream of speaking English fluently. As I continued my journey of learning English, I realized that speaking the language was one of the most important skills I needed to develop. I could read and write, and I was starting to understand how to form sentences. But I knew that if I wanted to truly master English, I had to be able to speak it confidently. Speaking is how we connect with others, how we share our thoughts and ideas. And I wanted to be able to do that in English, just like I could in my native language. At first, the idea of speaking English was a little scary. I worried about making mistakes, about not knowing the right words, or about people not understanding me. But I reminded myself that practice was the key to improvement. So I decided to start small and work my way up. One of the first steps I took was to practice speaking with my friends. I was fortunate to have a few friends who were also learning English, so we decided to help each other out. We would meet up regularly, sometimes over coffee or during a walk in the park, and we would try to have simple conversations in English. We would start with greetings like, "How are you?" or "Good morning," and gradually move on to more complex sentences. I remember one day, my friend Sarah greeted me with a big smile and said, "How are you today, Clark?" I took a deep breath and replied, "I'm fine. Thank you." It was a short exchange, just a few words, but it felt like a big accomplishment to me. We continued our conversation, keeping it simple, but I felt proud every time I was able to respond in English without hesitating too much. We would often repeat these conversations using the same phrases over and over until they felt natural. Practicing with friends was helpful because it made speaking English feel less intimidating. We laughed off our mistakes, corrected each other gently, and encouraged one another to keep trying. We knew we were all learning, and that made it easier to take risks and push ourselves. I learned that making mistakes was okay. It was all part of the learning process. But I didn't stop there. I knew that to get better, I needed to practice speaking English as often as possible, even when I was alone. So I started talking to myself in English. It might sound strange, but it was a great way to build confidence and fluency. I would describe my day, talk about what I was doing, or even have imaginary conversations with myself. For example, while making breakfast, I might say, "I'm making eggs for breakfast," or "I need to buy more bread." These simple sentences helped me think in English, and over time, speaking became more automatic. I would also use English to describe things around me. If I saw a tree, I would say, "That's a tall tree." Or if I was walking in the park, I might say, "The sun is shining brightly today." By doing this, I was practicing how to put words together in a natural way, and it helped me get used to forming sentences on the spot. Sometimes I would practice by imagining different scenarios where I might need to speak English. I would pretend I was in a store asking for help. "Excuse me, where can I find the milk?" Or I would imagine ordering food at a restaurant. "I would like a pizza, please." This kind of role-playing made me feel more prepared for real-life situations. It gave me the confidence to speak up when I actually found myself in those situations. Another technique I found helpful was to mimic what I heard in English. I would watch English movies, listen to English songs, or follow along with English podcasts, and I would try to repeat what I heard. If I heard a character in a movie say, "I'm happy to see you," I would pause and say it myself, copying the way they said it. This helped me with pronunciation and intonation, making my English sound more natural. As I practiced more, I noticed that speaking English became easier. The words started to come to me more quickly, and I wasn't as nervous about making mistakes. I felt more comfortable holding conversations in English, whether with friends or even strangers. I started to use English more in my daily life, whether at the grocery store, at work, or just chatting with someone new. Each time I spoke English, I felt a little more confident, a little more capable. There were still moments of doubt, times when I stumbled over my words or couldn't find the right thing to say, but I learned to be patient with myself. I knew that speaking a new language was a challenge, and that it was okay to take my time. I reminded myself of how far I had come, and that each conversation was an opportunity to learn and improve. Speaking English every day, both with others and by myself, became a habit. It was no longer something I had to force myself to do. It became part of my routine, part of who I was becoming as an English speaker. And with each passing day, I could feel myself getting closer to my goal of speaking English fluently. I knew that by continuing to practice, I would keep getting better, and that gave me the motivation to keep going. As I continued to practice speaking English, I realized that listening was just as important. I needed to be able to understand what others were saying in English, especially in real life conversations where people speak quickly and naturally. I knew that the more I listened, the better I would get at understanding different accents, tones, and the rhythm of the language. So I decided to make listening to English a regular part of my learning routine. One day, I came across some English cartoons while browsing online. I thought to myself, these might be a good place to start. Cartoons are often designed for children, so the language used is usually simple and easy to follow. The characters speak clearly, and the sentences are short and direct. I decided to give it a try. I started by watching a cartoon that I used to enjoy in my native language. I found the English version and began to watch it. At first, it felt a little strange to hear the characters speaking in English, but as I kept watching, I started to get used to it. I noticed that I could understand more than I expected, and this gave me a boost of confidence. The colorful visuals and simple storylines made it easier for me to follow along, even if I didn't catch every word. As I watched, I paid close attention to how the characters spoke. I listened carefully to their pronunciation, intonation, and the way they put words together. I found that by focusing on these details, I could start to mimic the way they spoke. Whenever I heard a word or phrase that was new to me, I would pause the video and repeat it out loud, trying to match the way the character said it. This practice helped me improve my pronunciation and made me feel more comfortable with the natural flow of English. One of the first new words I learned from a cartoon was happy.